Hello, I'm Malcolm Cox. In the Four Rivers region of the London International Church of Christ, we've just begun a series on 1st Thessalonians. This is an introduction to the book of Thessalonians, which I hope will set the context and the background to the book, which you will find interesting and helpful as we study through 1st Thessalonians. 1st Thessalonians, a little bit of background. First of all, we see on this slide a picture of the forum that would have been in existence at the time that Paul was in Thessalonica. It's been hidden for 2,000 years. No one knew it was even there until they removed the bus garage that was on top of it, and in doing so they discovered everything that was underneath. So it's been excavated now, and more things are being excavated in Thessalonica. Its location, one of the principal cities of Macedonia during the Hellenistic and Roman periods. As we zoom in, we see it there. It was named after a stepsister of Alexander the Great, apparently. And if you were coming in from the sea, this is the view you would have as you came into the port. Let's talk about the timeline. Paul's missionary journeys. The first one took place about 48 to 49 AD and is recorded in Acts chapter 13 and 14. Paul passed through and preached in Salamis, Paphos, Pisidian Antioch, Iconium, Lystra and Derbe, to name but a few of the places. And his route took him, according to that blue line on the map there. Some sailing and some work in the interior of Asia Minor. The second missionary journey took place about 50 to 52 AD and is recorded in Acts 15, 16, 17 and 18. And Paul went to Philippi and then Thessalonica, our city that we're focusing on, as well as Berea, Athens and Corinth. The route of that journey is the white line on the map and was considerably more extensive than the first missionary journey. The third missionary journey was recorded in Acts 18, 19, 20 and 21 and took place perhaps between about 53 and 57 AD. Paul went through the regions of Galatia and Phrygia and visited Ephesus, the areas of Macedonia and Greece, as well as Assos, Miletus and Tyre, as well as a few other places, and again, a more extensive journey. Perhaps one thing to reflect on with this, of course, is that Paul didn't have some master plan that we can make out. The Holy Spirit took him from place to place. Sometimes it prevented him from going where he wanted, and other times I think it took him where he didn't want to go, most specifically prison cells and things like that. And it's good for us in our Christian life to remember that, well, we might have our plans, but God has better ones. Sometimes not what we expect. So, Paul found himself in Thessalonica in Acts 17. They passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia. They came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As was his custom, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. "This Jesus I am proclaiming to you is the Messiah," he said. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and quite a few prominent women. But other Jews were jealous. So they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace, formed a mob and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." When they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. Then they made Jason and the others post bond and let them go. As soon as it was night, the believers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. So here we have the establishment of the church there in Thessalonica, in 10 short verses. Quite a baptism of fire, you could say. A troubled beginning in some ways, but an exciting beginning in other ways. One small thing just to mention while we're here is that Thessalonica is important because it has the word politarch. Now, in the English translation, it doesn't say politarch. You'll see in the middle of the screen there, it says city officials. But that's translated from a Greek word, politarch. And this led many Bible skeptics to claim this was another example of Luke being inaccurate because there was no other use of the word politarch in Greek literature that could be found. until in the 19th century someone was digging and they found in Thessalonica the Vardar Gate, which spanned the Egnatian Way on the west side of the city. And there's an inscription, which you have on the screen in front of you, dating from the late 1st century BC to the early 2nd century AD, using the word politarch. 35 inscriptions have now been found using the word politarch, including several in Thessalonica itself. So Luke was accurate. Further evidence that the Bible is an accurate representation of contemporary events. Anyway, moving on. Paul is the author. I don't think there's too much doubt about that. He references himself, and most scholars would agree. It is written by Paul. It might be the first letter he wrote that we still have. Galatians might be before 1st Thessalonians, but both of them are very early, written around 50 AD. Probably Paul was in Corinth when he wrote the letter, and significantly, he's writing to a young church. And that needs to be borne in mind as we read 1st Thessalonians. The structure of the book? Well, you could structure it a number of different ways, but here's one way. After a brief opening greeting, we have the effect of the gospel. Paul remembers the effect of the gospel on the Thessalonians, and we'll cover that in our first full class. Then he thinks back to his past relationship with them, and following on goes on to his present concern for them. So we'll see that at least half of the book or more is really about his relationship and memories and concern for them. We follow that in chapter 4 with encouragement to right living, the right ethics, and the right actions as a Christian. And then he deals with some misunderstandings about the second coming of Jesus before going back to a few more instructions for life in the church and a closing prayer, some requests and greetings. Perhaps a key verse, certainly for the first class of chapter 1, but perhaps even for the whole book, is this in chapter 1, verse 7. You became a model to all the believers in Macedonia and Achaia. A model. They became a model. And much of the book, I believe, is written to help them to maintain their convictions about being a model, and then to continue to be a model, not just to them, but to all the places where the gospel will go. Our first class is chapter 1, the gospel and its fruit, but that will have to wait for another recording. I hope this has been helpful. So there you have it, some background to the book of 1st Thessalonians. I hope you found it useful. Let me know what you think about the book, what you find useful about it, or if you have any questions about it. And why don't you follow on by listening to and watching the recordings as we go through the series. God bless.